Hello everyone, it's Shel from Paper Rock TO Studio, and today I'm sharing with you my October artist trading card for the Pick a Stick Challenge. The Pick a Stick Challenge is the Facebook group where myself and my friends pick 10 random prompts every month, and we have you do them in order to make a art journal page. But we pick randomly 3 of the prompts to give you an additional challenge of making an artist trading card with just 3. So this month, this is the 3, and the first one was to make your own stamp and use it on your card. So there are lots and lots and lots of ways of making a stamp. You can use kids' fun foam and just cut out a shape. You could use a sponge. You could use all kinds of different things, mark making things. But I'm actually going to carve a stamp. And I'm using a big eraser from the dollar store. This is to erase big mistakes. It's a joke eraser. So it's soft like an eraser. It's just real big. So the first thing I did was cut off the weird ends. And then I had made a drawing of the stamp that I'm going to make. It's a sunflower. I traced over the drawing with a black marker so that I could see through the paper better. And then I went over it scribbling wise with graphite. That's, my soft graphite that I use to draw all the time. And now I've laid it on top of the eraser, and I'm drawing from the back and using a ballpoint pen, and that transfers that graphite to the rubber so that I'll be able to see the design. Of course, you could just draw right on the rubber, but I decided to do it this way to make it, real legit about how I'm carving this stamp, going through all the steps. This is a carving toolkit, and it's made by Speedball. I'll put all the materials I used in the description box below, so if you want one of these carving kits, you can find it. It has 5 different little cutting tools that are stored inside the handle. And then it has one of those twisty things where you slide the end of it in, twist it tight, and you can change out the tips to use the ones you want. The first one that I'm using is a very small V-tipped cutter. In order to just go around, this is a pretty fine stamp. It's not chunky. It's like, a pretty fine design. So I'm going around everything on the outside edge of the lines, because I know that I want to cut away all the background and leave the foreground standing up. You could do it either way. You could cut out everything and then you would have a black or whatever color stamp with a white impression on the inside, or you can cut out the background and then you get the raised impression of the flowers with no background, and that's what I'm doing. So you could do it either way. So using this little teeny tiny one, I'm cutting out all the details around the edges, and this part probably takes the most time of all the carving because it's picky work. Going around each little petal, going around, cutting out the details on the insides to make it look as much like the drawing as I possibly can. So I do this for a while. This whole project took me an hour and 36 minutes. So this is sped up to, in some cases, 4 times, in some cases, 8 times fast. So then I switched over to a flatter, wider cutting blade. Oh, I haven't done it yet. First, I'm just cutting off the corners, edges with an X-Acto knife, because I know I'm not going to need those to be sticking up and bothering me. Then I'm switching out the blade to a flat. It's not completely flat. It's kind of like a scoop, sort of more of a rounded rather than a V. This one takes off a lot of rubber at once, as you can see. So now I'm removing as much as I can of the background to make a relief and make those leaves and stems stand up. This one can't do a lot of detail because it doesn't have a V shape, it's flat. So It's more just for the rough work of removing as much rubber as you can as quickly as you can. It doesn't get down into the little details. It just scoops off the excess. Sometimes I use a X-Acto knife to go around the details. You don't have to though, but it helps me a little bit. Eraser is pretty easy to carve. It's not as easy to carve as the rubber that you can buy from Speedball to make your own stamps. You can also do something called lino cuts, which is another type of a surface to make block printing. I think it must be a linoleum since it's called lino, but I'm not sure. But it's a little bit harder to cut. Then they have different stuff like Speedy Carve and Easy Carve that Speedball makes, and I'm sure other companies make, things for stamp carving. It's just all I've ever used is Speedball. They also make my brayer, both of my brayers, so that's the type of stuff they make. So then I switch out to a larger V shape, and I'm doing some of the detail work right up to the edges with that, because there's some places I can't get into with that scoop, and this one removes more rubber than the little tiny one. So then I'm going to make my first stamp impression with it to see how it works. Pretty good, but there's a little bit of excess that needs to be removed, as there always is. So I go back in with that V. And of course now those little spots that are giving me trouble on the design are raised up and black because I've put the archival ink on there. So it's easier to see them, see what I need to get off. And then I clean out all that bits and pieces of rubber, and I'm going to do another impression to see if I'm happy. It's pretty good. Got a couple more little pieces, but then I think it's pretty much done. Hand carved stamp doesn't, make as clean of an impression as a nice red rubber vulcanized stamp that somebody's made on a machine, of course. It looks very primitive in comparison. So now to stamp it, I want it to be a lot of different colors instead of just a plain solid color. So I'm getting out my SEI from Japan markers, and I'm coloring directly on the stamp where I want certain colors. I've got a couple greens, I've got a couple browns, and a couple yellows. I'm making the dark brown ground, and then I've got the light green and dark green going on to the stem and leaves. And then I've got a bright yellow and then kind of more of an ochre. Then I mist my watercolor paper, which has been cut into an ATC size, just to make it look like a watercolor rather than a clean impression. That was what I was going for. So then I quickly dried it off so that it didn't bleed too much. But since these are water-soluble markers, they bleed very well on the paper and make a impressionistic look rather than a clean stamping of it. Then I fill in the rest with another set of the image. Then I stamp it off on an index card for later because it's kind of pretty. Some nice sunflowers for the fall. So then before I do anything else to it, I want to seal it. So I use some matte liquid medium, brayer that over it real quickly, and dry it so that now it's all sealed up. So if I put wet medium over it, it won't run anymore. And then I've got a couple Tattered Angels mists, and I'm misting and then splattering with the two colors, kind of a spring green and a turquoise, just to fill in the background, but I'm blotting up where the flowers are so that they don't get colored over the top of them. And that is the Drip and Squirt step 2. Going around the edges with some potting soil to create my border, because you know I like borders. And then the next one is to use a tab. Not sure where that came from, but yeah, use a tab. So my first inclination is to have the tab to the side, kind of like it's a small index card that you'd have like in a flipper thing where you have the tab. You can see what it is or whatever. So I decided to put it on a piece of cardstock and then have my tab, which I put one of the Tim Holtz stickers from Ranger on the side. And I was happy with that, and I decided to go in and make my sketchy lines real quick with the brown Posca pen, and thought I was done. But then I ended up not liking that because I realized that I would not be able to put this ATC in my little sleeves that I store them in, because it's too big now. Because for one, I didn't trim the card itself down smaller, and for the other thing, that tab is sticking out. So I end up ripping it apart and making the tab on the inside of the card instead. And then I added some more brown around the edges and deepened up the grunge effect there. And then I still think it's boring. It's pretty boring. So I decide to make one of the flowers be 3D. So I get out the pins again and stamp it on some ivory cardstock that I've spritzed with the Tattered Angels mist. And I fussy cut that out, and then I use some pop dots to stick it on there, trying to just add some interest to the ATC. It's just pretty boring. Maybe it's because there's a lot of brown and I don't like brown. I don't know. Brown. Bleh. So that's what I end up doing, is popping that on there, and then in the end I add glitter because I just decide glitter. What else? So if you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment, share. Those things help out my channel by letting YouTube know that I'm making something valuable. And here come your close-ups. Thanks. Bye-bye.